The Grand Council chamber on Velcor Prime was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high above that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Massive windows lined the walls, showing the purple sky of the alien planet outside. In the center of the room, delegates from 57 different alien species sat in a wide circle. Each species had their own special seats designed for their unique bodies. Captain Jake Morrison walked into the chamber with his two companions. Lieutenant Sophie Grant walked on his left, carrying a data tablet with all their documents. Commander Ryan Blake walked on his right, his eyes constantly scanning the room for any threats. Jake felt small in this massive space. Earth had only been part of the Galactic Federation for 3 years. They were the newest members, and everyone knew it. Jake had been a soldier for 20 years before becoming a diplomat. He knew how to fight, but he also knew when to talk instead. The Earth government chose him for this job because they needed someone who understood both war and peace. Today, he hoped talking would be enough. The 3 humans found their seats in the circle. The chairs were too big for them, made for species that were larger than humans. Jake had to sit on the edge of his seat to keep his feet on the ground. He noticed some of the alien delegates watching them and whispering to each other. The council speaker, a tall being made of what looked like living crystal, called the meeting to order. Its voice sounded like wind chimes when it spoke. The chamber fell silent as the speaker announced the first topic of the day. It was the human petition about the star system known to Earth as Kepler 442. Jake stood up and walked to the center of the circle. This was where speakers addressed the council. He activated his data tablet and a hologram appeared in the air above him, showing the star system in question. 2 planets orbited a yellow sun. One planet had vast amounts of valuable metals. The other planet could support human life with some work. He began his presentation. He explained that human explorers had discovered this system 5 years ago, before Earth even joined the Federation. They had mapped it, studied it, and filed claim papers with Earth's government. According to Federation law, the species that discovers and documents a system first has the right to settle it. But 3 weeks ago, ships from the Skarath Empire had arrived in the system. They started mining operations on the metal-rich planet without asking permission. When human patrol ships tried to talk to them, the Skarath told the humans to go away. They said the system belonged to the Skarath now. Jake showed the council all the proof. He had records of the original human exploration mission. He had copies of the claim documents filed with Earth's government. He had video of the Skarath ships refusing to leave. Everything was organized and clear. Before he could finish, someone started laughing. It was a rough hissing sound. Jake turned to see Ambassador Zethrak of the Skarath Empire standing up. The Skarath looked like a giant lizard that walked on 2 legs. His scales were dark green and reflected the light. His eyes were cold and yellow. Zethrak spoke in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. He said the humans were acting like children who didn't understand how the real galaxy worked. More laughter came from other parts of the chamber. The insect-like Vrex delegates clicked their mandibles in a way that their translator said meant amusement. Even some of the usually neutral species seemed to find the situation funny. Jake felt his face getting hot with anger, but he kept his voice calm. He asked Zethrak to explain what he meant. The Skarath ambassador walked to the center of the chamber, making Jake step back. Zethrak was nearly 8 feet tall and much heavier than any human. Zethrak said that discovery rights only mattered if a species had the power to defend what they found. He said humans had a few small exploration ships and trading vessels, but nothing that could be called a real military fleet. He asked how humans planned to enforce their claim. With angry letters? With more meetings and speeches? The Skarath ambassador turned to address the whole council. He reminded everyone that humans had no advanced weapons technology. Everything Earth used for space travel had been bought from other Federation species or copied from their designs. Humans had contributed nothing new to the galaxy. They had no power, no influence, and no respect. Zethrak looked at Jake with what might have been pity or contempt. He said humans should be grateful they were even allowed to sit in this chamber. Most species had to prove themselves worthy before joining the Federation. Humans had been accepted out of curiosity and amusement, like adopting a pet that could talk. Jake wanted to punch the alien in his smug face. His hands formed fists at his sides. Next to him, Sophie's face had turned red with rage. Ryan put a hand on Jake's shoulder, silently telling him to stay calm. Fighting here would only make things worse. The council speaker asked if there were any other comments. A few species spoke up, but none of them supported the human position. Some said that frontier disputes should be settled by the stronger party. Others said that humans needed to accept their place as junior members of the Federation. One delegate even suggested that humans should pay the Scarith for the privilege of learning how real space powers operated. When the vote came, it was overwhelming. 43 species voted to deny the human petition. Only 7 species abstained. 5 species voted in favor of Earth, but only because they had trade agreements with humans and didn't want to damage those relationships. Not one species voted for Earth because they thought it was the right thing to do. The speaker declared the matter settled. The Scarith Empire would be allowed to continue their mining operations. Earth's claim to the Kepler 442 system was officially rejected. The speaker moved on to the next topic on the agenda as if nothing important had just happened. Jake stood there for a moment, feeling like he had been slapped. He had prepared for hours. He had every legal argument ready. He had all the proof anyone could ask for. And none of it mattered. The council didn't care about the law or about fairness. They cared about power, and Earth had shown them none. Sophie touched his arm and quietly suggested they leave. The 3 humans walked out of the chamber with as much dignity as they could manage. Behind them, Jake could still hear laughter and conversation. The aliens had already forgotten about Earth's humiliation. It meant nothing to them. They returned to their small diplomatic shuttle in silence. The ship was cramped and old, another reminder of Earth's junior status in the Federation. Jake sat in the pilot's seat but didn't start the engines yet. He just stared out the window at the alien city below. Ryan finally spoke. He said that this never would have happened if the Council knew what Earth was really capable of. Sophie agreed, but pointed out that they had orders to keep Earth's secrets. The government had decided that appearing weak was safer than appearing threatening. Jake thought about those orders. For 3 years, Earth had played the role of the friendly newcomer. They had been polite, cooperative, and careful not to upset anyone. They had bought technology from other species instead of showing what they had developed themselves. They had accepted insults and condescension because they were told it would help them fit in. Now Jake wondered if that had been a mistake. Maybe the only way to earn respect in the galaxy was to demand it. Maybe being nice just made you a target. He opened a secure communication channel to Earth. The quantum relay would send his message instantly across hundreds of light years. He recorded everything that had happened in the council chamber. He included the video files that showed how the aliens had laughed at them. He made sure his report captured not just the words but the contempt and mockery in Zethrak's voice. Then Jake added his own recommendation. He said Earth had 3 choices. They could accept the loss of Kepler 442 and try to move on. They could attempt to negotiate privately with the Scarith, maybe offer them something in exchange for sharing the system. Or they could show the galaxy that humanity was not as helpless as everyone assumed. He explained that the third option was risky. It would reveal secrets that Earth had kept for decades. It might make other species nervous or even hostile, but it would also make it clear that humanity could not be pushed around. The galaxy would have to decide whether they wanted Earth as a friend or an enemy, but they would no longer be able to treat humans as harmless children. Jake encrypted the message with the highest level security codes and sent it. The computer confirmed that Earth's government had received it. Now all they could do was wait for a response. Sophie asked what he thought Earth would decide. Jake looked at his 2 companions. Both of them were good people who had served Earth faithfully for years. They deserved to know the truth. He told them something that most people on Earth didn't know. He said that for the past 20 years, before Earth even made contact with the Federation, their world had been building something in secret. Something big. Something that would change everything if it was ever revealed. Ryan's eyes widened. He asked if Jake meant the rumors were true. The stories that some military personnel whispered about. The massive black budget that seemed to have no explanation. The scientists and engineers who disappeared into classified projects and never spoke about their work. Jake nodded. He said that Earth's friendly, peaceful approach to the deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in North America, there was a facility that most people on Earth didn't know existed. The entrance was hidden inside what looked like an old mining operation. Anyone who stumbled across it would see locked gates, warning signs about unstable tunnels, and nothing interesting. but 20 miles of rock separated that false entrance from the real facility below. Inside the mountain, hundreds of people worked around the clock. Military officers studied tactical displays. Scientists analyzed data from distant stars. Engineers reviewed blueprints for weapons that had never been tested in actual combat. This was the headquarters of Project Sentinel, and it had one purpose: keep Earth safe, no matter what threats the galaxy might hold. President Linda Hayes walked through the underground corridors with her security team following close behind. She had been president for 6 years now, and she had spent almost every day of those years thinking about Earth's place in the galaxy. The burden of knowing humanity's greatest secret weighed on her constantly. She entered the Situation Room where her top advisors were waiting. The room was large but felt cramped with all the equipment and displays covering the walls. A massive holographic projection showed the Kepler 442 star system floating in the center of the room. Red markers indicated the positions of Scarath ships. Admiral Peter Knox stood up when the president entered. He was a tall man with gray hair and a face that showed the stress of his position. He commanded all of Earth's hidden military forces, and he had been pushing for action for months. He thought hiding their strength made Earth look weak, and invited exactly the kind of disrespect they had just experienced. Director Carol Bennett was also present. She ran Earth's intelligence service and knew more about alien species than anyone else on the planet. She had agents secretly placed throughout Federation space, gathering information and watching for threats. Her network had warned her that something like this might happen, but warning about a problem was different from stopping it. President Hayes sat down at the head of the table. She had already watched the video from the council chamber 3 times. Each time made her angrier. She asked Admiral Knox to brief everyone on the current situation. The Admiral touched a control and the hologram zoomed in on Kepler 442. He explained that the Scarath had moved fast after the council decision. They now had 15 large mining ships in the system, along with 3 heavy cruisers and 12 smaller frigates as military escorts. They were building orbital processing stations and preparing for long-term operations. Knox said that by Federation standards, this was a significant military presence. The 3 cruisers alone could destroy most civilian shipping and fight off pirates or raiders. The Scarath clearly expected no serious resistance. They were right to think that, based on what they knew about human capabilities. But what the Scarath didn't know could fill libraries. Director Bennett pulled up another display showing Earth's actual military assets. The numbers made even the president feel a little awe, even though she had authorized most of this spending. 37 years ago, Earth detected the first alien signals from space. Scientists were excited. Religious leaders debated what it meant. Politicians worried about what kind of neighbors humanity might have. For 2 years, they listened and learned about the galaxy beyond their solar system. What they learned made them nervous. The galaxy was full of life, but it was also full of conflict. Species competed for resources, fought over territory, and formed alliances based on power rather than principle. There were laws, but those laws seemed to protect the strong more than the weak. The leaders of Earth made a decision. They would approach the galaxy peacefully and hopefully, but they would also prepare for the worst. Every major nation contributed money, resources, and their best people to Project Sentinel. They built shipyards in the outer solar system, where alien sensors wouldn't detect them. They developed weapons and defenses using human ingenuity and a few carefully stolen alien designs. For 20 years before making official contact with the Federation, Earth worked in secret. They built warships that could match or exceed anything they had seen in alien hands. They trained crews in tactics that aliens had never encountered. They created a defensive fleet that could protect Earth from invasion or intimidation. Then, when they were ready, Earth announced its presence to the galaxy, but they showed only a fraction of their strength. A few exploration ships, some trading vessels, diplomatic shuttles, nothing threatening. Nothing that would make other species nervous. They wanted to see how the galaxy would treat them when they appeared weak. President Hayes looked at the displays showing Earth's hidden fleet. 12 Titan-class dreadnoughts, each one 3 kilometers long and carrying enough firepower to level a city. 36 heavy cruisers built for extended combat operations. Over 100 frigates and destroyers for patrol and escort duty. Thousands of smaller craft for various support roles. It was a fleet that could challenge any single Federation species. Maybe not win against all of them combined, but certainly make any attack on Earth cost more than it was worth. And the galaxy had no idea any of it existed. The debate around the table was intense. Some advisors argued that revealing the fleet would destroy Earth's diplomatic position. Other species would feel betrayed and deceived. They might form alliances against humanity out of fear. The careful relationships Earth had built over 3 years could collapse overnight. Others argued the opposite. They said that continuing to appear weak was more dangerous than appearing strong. The Skarath incident proved that the Federation only respected power. If Earth wanted to be treated as an equal, they needed to demonstrate that they were equal. Admiral Knox made his position clear. He said that Kepler 442 was more than just one star system. It contained resources Earth needed for expansion and 2 planets that could eventually support human colonies. Losing it would set a precedent that humanity could be robbed whenever a stronger species wanted something. More importantly, Knox argued that how Earth responded to this crisis would define their future in the galaxy. If they backed down now, they would be backing down forever. Every species would know that humans could be bullied and intimidated. The mockery they had experienced at the Council would become standard treatment. Director Bennett added intelligence analysis to support the military arguments. Her agents reported that several other species were watching this situation closely. Some were testing Earth's resolve, seeing if humans were worth taking seriously. Others were calculating whether they could take advantage of humanity, the same way the Skarath had. The discussion went on for hours. President Hayes listened to every argument, considered every risk, and thought about what this decision would mean for billions of humans across Earth and its colonies. She knew that whatever she decided today would shape humanity's future for generations. Finally, she made her choice. Earth would not back down. They would not negotiate from weakness. They would send one warship to Kepler 442 with orders to enforce humanity's territorial claim. If the Skarath refused to leave peacefully, they would be removed by force. But the president added one critical limitation. She authorized the use of force only against military targets and only to disable, not destroy. She didn't want to massacre Skarath crews or start a war. She wanted to demonstrate strength while showing restraint. The goal was to earn respect, not create enemies. Admiral Knox nodded and touched his communication device. He sent encrypted orders to a facility far from Earth, hidden in the outer reaches of the solar system. Within minutes, the acknowledgement came back. The Vengeance was being prepared for deployment. In orbit around Saturn's moon Titan, hidden behind the massive planet and its swirling rings, the secret shipyard had been operating for decades. Dozens of ships floated in their construction berths or mooring docks. But one vessel dominated the facility. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built. The Vengeance stretched 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was dark gray, covered with armor that combined human steel with alien composite materials. Weapons studded its surface like the spines on some deep-sea creature. Massive engines at the rear could push the ship to speeds that would surprise most alien captains. Commander Kate Sullivan received the deployment orders in her private quarters aboard the ship. She had been the Vengeance's captain for 2 years, but this would be its first real mission. Everything until now had been training exercises and system tests. Now they would see if all those years of preparation had been worth it. Kate was 43 years old and had spent 25 of those years in Earth's military. She had fought in the last major conflict before first contact, leading strike missions against enemy positions. She understood tactics and strategy better than anyone else in the fleet. That's why they gave her the biggest ship and the most important mission. She called her senior officers to the bridge for a briefing. Lieutenant Chris Harper, the weapons officer, arrived first. He was young but brilliant, with an almost instinctive understanding of combat systems. He had helped design some of the Vengeance's weapons and was eager to see them used for real. The rest of the command crew assembled quickly. They all knew the Kepler 442 system was busy with activity. Huge mining ships tore into the surface of the second planet, extracting tons of valuable metal every hour. Smaller ships carried the raw ore to processing stations that were still being built in orbit. The Skarath workers moved with confidence, certain that nothing would interrupt their operations. Admiral Krath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Dominant Fang, and watched the mining progress with satisfaction. This assignment was boring, but it was easy. His 3 heavy cruisers and 12 frigates formed a loose defensive formation around the work area. His crews ran routine drills and conducted regular patrols, but nobody really expected trouble. Krath was a veteran of several border conflicts with rival species. He had commanded ships in real battles where victory meant life and defeat meant death. Guarding a mining operation from humans who had no warships felt like a waste of his experience. But orders were orders, and at least this duty came with the promise of bonus pay from the mining consortium. His communication officer, a younger Scarath named Vex, worked at his station with practiced efficiency. Most of the communication traffic was routine updates from the mining crews, reports about equipment status, and occasional messages from Scarath space about supplies and personnel rotations. Then every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. Krath spun toward the tactical display, his warrior instincts instantly alert. His sensor officer was staring at her screen with an expression of confused disbelief. She reported a massive contact at the edge of the system. The sensors were having trouble getting accurate readings. The computer kept throwing errors, saying the size estimates couldn't be correct. Ships weren't that big. Nothing was that big except small moons or asteroids. Krath ordered his sensor officer to run a full diagnostic. She did, but the results came back the same. Whatever had just appeared in their system was reading as over 3 kilometers in length. Its power output was enormous, more than all 3 of his cruisers combined. And according to the electromagnetic signature, it was human in origin. That was impossible. Humans didn't have ships like that. Krath had reviewed Earth's entire fleet roster before accepting this assignment. Their largest vessels were small exploration ships barely 300 meters long. They had no military fleet to speak of, just a few patrol boats that could barely handle pirates. His weapons officer suggested that it might be a sensor ghost or some kind of electronic deception. Krath wanted to believe that, but his experience told him otherwise. Real threats didn't announce themselves with tricks and illusions. They came with overwhelming force and clear intent. The communication system activated without anyone on the Scarath bridge touching it. That alone was concerning. Someone had just overridden their systems and forced a channel open. The voice that came through spoke in perfect Scarath language, with no trace of mechanical translation. Commander Kate Sullivan identified herself as the captain of the Earth Defense Force warship Vengeance. Her voice was calm and professional, the tone of someone who was stating facts rather than making threats. She explained that the Kepler 442 system was within human territorial space, and that the Scarath presence was illegal. She gave them 1 hour. In that time, they were to shut down all mining operations, evacuate all personnel to their ships, and prepare to leave the system. If they complied, no one would be harmed and they could depart peacefully. If they refused, she would enforce Earth's territorial claim by removing them by force. The communication ended as abruptly as it began. Krath stared at the speaker in stunned silence. Around him, his bridge crew looked at each other with confusion and growing concern. One of the junior officers asked what they should do. Krath's first instinct was rage. How dare the humans give him orders? How dare they threaten the Scarath Empire? He had fought real battles against real warriors. He would not be intimidated by a species that had joined the Federation only 3 years ago. He called a conference with his other ship captains and the mining supervisor. Their faces appeared on his view screen, all showing various degrees of shock and anger. The mining supervisor was particularly upset. He had invested enormous resources in this operation and had contracts to fulfill. Leaving now would bankrupt his company and destroy his career. One of the cruiser captains pointed out that the human ship was very large, but size didn't necessarily mean combat effectiveness. It could be a converted cargo hauler or construction ship. Humans might have welded some weapons to a big hull and hoped it would scare them away without a fight. Another captain agreed. He said that humans had no experience in space warfare. They had never fought a real battle against a military force like the Scarath. Even if their ship was genuine, their crew probably had no idea how to use it effectively. Krath made his decision. They would call the human bluff. He opened a return communication channel, making sure his voice carried all the contempt he felt. He told Commander Sullivan that the Galactic Council had already ruled on this matter. Earth's claim had been rejected. The system belonged to the Scarath Empire now, and no converted cargo ship was going to change that. He suggested that Sullivan turn her ship around and go home before she learned the hard way what happened to those who challenged the Scarath military. Perhaps when she reported back to Earth, her leaders would teach her the difference between diplomatic protests and actual power. There was a long silence after Krath finished speaking. He smiled, satisfied that he had put the human in her place. His crew members seemed more relaxed now, convinced that their admiral had the situation under control. Then Sullivan's voice came back through the speakers. It was colder now, stripped of any warmth or courtesy. She said simply that the 1-hour countdown had begun. She suggested that Admiral Krath use the time to make his peace with whatever gods the Scarrath believed in. Then the communication cut off. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Kate Sullivan turned away from the communication console. She had hoped the Scarrath would be reasonable, but she had expected exactly this kind of response. Bullies rarely back down when challenged. They needed to be taught lessons they would never forget. She looked at Lieutenant Chris Harper at the weapons station. He nodded to confirm that all systems were ready. The railguns were charged and loaded. Missile tubes were flooded and armed. Point defense lasers were tracking potential targets. Shield generators were running at full power. The Vengeance was ready for war. Kate gave orders throughout the ship. All crew members were to go to battle stations. All non-essential systems were to be shut down to maximize power for shields and weapons. Damage control teams were to stand ready in case the Scarrath managed to hurt them. The massive warship came alive with activity. In the engineering sections, crews monitored the fusion reactors that powered everything. In the weapons bays, gunners made final adjustments to targeting systems. In the medical areas, doctors and nurses prepared for potential casualties. The hour passed slowly for both sides. Krath kept his ships in their defensive formation, trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel. That massive human vessel just sat there at the edge of the system, making no aggressive moves but also showing no sign of backing down. The mining crews continued their work, though many of them kept glancing nervously at the sky. The workers had families back home. They had signed contracts for dangerous mining work, but nobody had mentioned the possibility of combat with alien warships. Finally, the hour expired. The Scarrath were still in position. The mining operations continued. Admiral Krath sat on his command chair, waiting to see what the humans would do now that their bluff had been called. Commander Sullivan did not immediately attack the Scarrath warships. She wanted to demonstrate exactly what the Vengeance could do while minimizing casualties. She had her tactical officer identify the largest automated mining facility on the planet's surface. It was mostly run by machines with only a small crew for maintenance and oversight. She verified that the facility's crew had enough warning systems to evacuate if needed. She had her communication officer send a 5-minute warning on all frequencies, telling anyone in or near the target facility to get to safety immediately. Then she gave Lieutenant Harper permission to fire when ready. The weapons officer's hands moved across his controls with practiced precision. He selected the primary railgun battery and targeted the mining facility. 8 massive magnetic accelerators that ran the entire length of the ship began their firing sequence. The railguns fired simultaneously. 8 tungsten steel projectiles, each one weighing several tons, were accelerated to nearly 10% of the speed of light. They crossed the distance to the planet in seconds, leaving trails of ionized particles in their wake. The mining facility's defensive shields were designed for protection against meteor impacts and atmospheric debris. They might as well have been tissue paper. The relativistic projectiles punched through them without even slowing down. When they hit the facility itself, the kinetic energy transfer was catastrophic. The facility simply ceased to exist. The impact released energy equivalent to multiple nuclear weapons. The massive structure that had taken weeks to build and covered several square miles was vaporized in an instant. The 3 Scarrath heavy cruisers charged toward the Vengeance with all their weapons systems active. On each bridge, crews worked frantically to prepare for combat. This was what they had trained for, what they had spent years learning. They were professional warriors of the Scarrath Empire, descendants of a culture that had conquered dozens of worlds. Admiral Krath watched his tactical display with intense focus. His 3 cruisers formed a wide attack formation, coming at the human ship from different angles to divide its defensive fire. The frigates circled around to attack from behind and the sides. It was a textbook assault pattern that had worked in many previous battles. The Scarrath opened fire first. Plasma cannons on all three cruisers launched bolts of superheated matter toward the Vengeance. Each bolt carried enough energy to punch through meters of armor plating. Dozens of them streaked across space at a significant fraction of light speed, leaving glowing trails behind them. On the Vengeance's bridge, Lieutenant Harper watched the incoming fire on his tactical screen. He didn't look worried. The ship's defensive systems were already responding automatically, their reaction time measured in milliseconds rather than seconds. The Vengeance's shields activated at full strength. They were not like typical Federation shields that created a simple energy barrier. Human engineers had designed something more sophisticated, a layered defense that combined force field technology with ablative energy dissipation. The plasma bolts hit the shields and their energy was absorbed, distributed and bled off into space as harmless radiation. The shield display on Harper's console barely flickered. The Scareth had just hit them with what they probably considered their strongest opening salvo, and it had done essentially nothing. This was going to be even easier than their simulations had predicted. The Scareth frigates launched missiles, hoping to overwhelm the human ship's defenses with sheer numbers. Dozens of guided warheads accelerated toward the Vengeance, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. The Vengeance's point defense laser grid came alive. Hundreds of small laser turrets across the ship's hull began tracking and engaging the incoming missiles. Each turret could independently identify, target, and destroy threats without any human input. The system was designed to handle thousands of targets simultaneously. Missiles began exploding long before they reached the human ship. The lasers cut through their hulls with surgical precision, detonating their warheads harmlessly in space. In less than 30 seconds, every single Scareth missile had been destroyed. Not one got close enough to threaten the Vengeance. Admiral Krath stared at his tactical screen in growing horror. His weapons were doing nothing. The human ship's defenses were far more advanced than anything he had encountered. His plasma cannons, which should have at least weakened those shields, were being shrugged off as if they were toys. His missiles, which had never failed to damage enemy ships before, were being swatted out of space like insects. Commander Sullivan gave the order to return fire. She had orders to disable the Scareth ships without killing their crews if possible. That meant precision strikes against specific systems rather than overwhelming firepower. It would have been easier to just destroy them, but Earth wanted to send a message about strength tempered with restraint. Lieutenant Harper selected targets carefully. The Vengeance's computers had been analyzing the Scareth ship since they appeared. The tactical database identified weak points in their design, critical systems that could be disabled without causing catastrophic damage. Harper locked weapons on those specific locations and prepared to fire. The Vengeance's missile pods opened. Unlike Scareth missiles, which were basically rocket-propelled explosives with simple guidance systems, human missiles were intelligent weapons. Each one carried its own targeting computer, sensor array, and maneuvering thrusters. They could communicate with each other, coordinate their attacks, and adapt to enemy defenses. Dozens of missiles launched from the Vengeance and immediately spread out in complex patterns. They didn't just fly straight at their targets. They juked and weaved, deployed electronic countermeasures to confuse enemy sensors, and timed their approaches to hit from multiple angles simultaneously. The Scareth point defense systems tried to respond. Their laser turrets fired at the incoming missiles, but the human weapons were too fast, too maneuverable, and too smart. They predicted where the defensive fire would be and moved to avoid it. They deployed chaff and flares to distract tracking systems. They worked together like a pack of wolves hunting prey. The first heavy cruiser took 3 missile impacts in rapid succession. The warheads were fusion devices, but calibrated to produce smaller explosions than they were capable of. They hit the cruiser's shield generators, engine sections, and main weapons batteries. The shields collapsed instantly. The engines sputtered and died, leaving the ship drifting. The weapons went offline, their power conduits severed. In less than a minute, one of the Scareth's most powerful warships had been completely neutralized. It was still intact, its hull was not breached, and its crew was alive. But it was no longer a threat. It was just a powerless hulk floating in space. The second and third cruisers tried to scatter and create distance, hoping to regroup and plan a better strategy. It didn't matter. The Vengeance's targeting systems tracked them easily. More missiles launched, more precision strikes landed. Within 3 minutes of opening fire, All three Skarath heavy cruisers were disabled and drifting. The frigates realized they had no chance against this monster. Several of them tried to break off and escape, accelerating toward the edge of the system where they could jump to faster-than-light speed. Commander Sullivan couldn't allow that. If they escaped and reported back to Skarath space, a larger fleet might return before Earth was ready to reveal more of its strength. The Vengeance's railguns tracked the fleeing frigates. The massive weapons could fire projectiles across enormous distances with perfect accuracy. One by one, the railguns spoke. Each shot was carefully aimed at a frigate's engine section. The projectiles traveled so fast that the frigates had no time to evade. Engines exploded as the kinetic impacts tore through them. The frigates lost their ability to accelerate, their ability to maneuver, and their ability to jump away. They were trapped in the system, powerless and helpless just like the heavy cruisers. The entire battle had lasted less than 10 minutes. In that time, the Vengeance had completely destroyed a Skarath military force without taking a single point of damage. The ship's shields had barely been tested. Its armor had not been touched. Most of its weapons had not even been fired. On the bridge of the dominant Fang, Admiral Krath sat in his command chair surrounded by darkness. His ship's main power was offline. Emergency life support was running on backup batteries that would last a few hours at most. His crew was scrambling to assess damage and treat the injured. They had been lucky that the hull had not been breached, but Krath did not feel lucky. He felt humiliated. He had spent his entire career as a warrior, fought in dozens of battles, earned medals and honors for his service to the Empire. And he had just been defeated so completely, so easily, that it was hard to believe it had really happened. The humans had not just beaten him. They had made it look effortless. Every weapon he fired had been countered. Every tactic he attempted had been anticipated. Every advantage he thought he had turned out to be meaningless. The gap between Skarath and human military technology was not small. It was enormous. A communication came through on the emergency channels that still worked. Commander Sullivan's voice filled the darkened bridge. She informed Admiral Krath that emergency beacons had been activated on all his ships. Federation rescue vessels would arrive within hours to provide assistance and evacuate his crews if necessary. She also suggested that he use the time to think about what had happened here. Humanity had demonstrated that they were not weak, not helpless, and not willing to be pushed around. Perhaps the next time Krath encountered humans, he would treat them with the respect they deserved. Then the communication ended, leaving Krath alone with his thoughts and his shame. Around him, his crew worked in silence. No one wanted to talk about what had just happened. No one wanted to acknowledge that they had been utterly defeated by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. The mining ships, which had watched the battle from the relative safety of their orbits, immediately began evacuation procedures. The mining supervisor knew that staying in this system was impossible now. The humans had proven their claim with overwhelming force. Continuing mining operations would be suicide. The Vengeance moved into a stable orbit around the third planet, the one that could eventually be made habitable for humans. Commander Sullivan sent a message back to Earth confirming that the mission was successful. The system was secure. The Skarath threat had been neutralized without unnecessary casualties. On the bridge, Kate allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Everything had gone according to plan. Her crew had performed perfectly. The weapons had worked exactly as designed. They had achieved their objectives without becoming murderers or war criminals. But she also knew this was just the beginning. News of this battle would... The news traveled fast. Within hours, every major species in the Galactic Federation knew what had happened at Kepler 442. A single human warship had appeared from nowhere and completely destroyed a Skarath military force in less than 10 minutes. The details seemed impossible, but they came from too many reliable sources to ignore. At first, many species refused to believe it. The reports had to be exaggerated or mistaken. Humans didn't have warships like that. Everyone knew Earth's fleet consisted of a few small exploration vessels and trading ships. They were newcomers to space, barely capable of defending themselves against pirates. But the evidence was overwhelming. The Skarath themselves provided detailed sensor logs of the battle. They had no reason to lie about their own defeat. Independent, Observers from the Federation Monitoring Service arrived at Kepler 442 and confirmed everything. The disabled Scareth ships were exactly as described. The crater where the mining facility had been destroyed was visible from orbit, and the human warship was still there, making no attempt to hide. The Grand Council on Velcor Prime was in chaos. Emergency sessions were called at all hours. Ambassadors demanded answers. How long had humans been hiding this kind of military power? What else were they concealing? Were there more ships like the Vengeance? How many? The Scareth Empire was particularly outraged. Their ambassadors called for immediate sanctions against Earth for building military forces in secret and for attacking a Federation member species. They argued that humans had violated the spirit of the Federation by hiding their true capabilities. They demanded that Earth be expelled from the Federation and that their territory be restricted as punishment. But other species were more cautious. They remembered their own interactions with humans over the past 3 years. They thought about how they had treated Earth's diplomats, how they had dismissed human concerns, how they had laughed at human weakness. Now they wondered if that weakness had been calculated. Some species began reviewing their own military assessments. If humans could build ships like the Vengeance, what other technology might they possess? Intelligence agencies scrambled to gather more information about Earth's industrial capacity, their scientific advances, their population size and resources. The answers they found were concerning. Humanity had far more potential than anyone had realized. Captain Jake Morrison received an urgent message recalling him to Velcor Prime. The Council wanted to hold a special session to address the crisis. This time, Earth's diplomats would not be presenting a petition. They would be answering questions about what their world had been hiding. Jake arrived at the Council chamber with Sophie and Ryan beside him. The atmosphere was completely different from their last visit. There was no laughter now. The alien delegates watched the human trio with expressions ranging from respect to suspicion to barely concealed fear. Some species that had previously ignored Earth's presence now tracked every movement the humans made. The crystal speaker called the session to order and asked Captain Morrison to address the council. Jake walked to the center of the chamber, the same place where he had been humiliated just days ago. But this time felt very different. This time, everyone was listening. Jake began by acknowledging the obvious. Yes, Earth had built a significant military fleet in secret. Yes, they had concealed their true capabilities from the Federation. He explained that this decision was made long before humanity even joined the galactic community. He told them about Earth's history. For thousands of years, humans had only known their own world. Then suddenly they discovered a galaxy full of advanced civilizations. They had no way to know whether these aliens would be friends or threats. They had no way to predict how they would be treated, so Earth made a choice. They would approach the galaxy with peaceful intentions and open cooperation. But they would also prepare defenses in case that approach failed. They built a fleet that could protect their homeworld and their people from any potential danger. It was not aggression. It was survival. Jake paused and looked around the chamber. He saw delegates who were listening carefully, trying to understand Earth's perspective. He also saw delegates who were angry, who felt betrayed and deceived. He knew his next words would be the most important of his career. He said that keeping the fleet secret was also a test. Earth wanted to see how the Federation would treat a species that appeared weak and inexperienced. Would they be welcomed as equals despite their apparent lack of power? Would they be treated fairly based on their character and contributions? Or would they only be respected if they demonstrated military strength? The recent council session had answered that question. Clearly, the moment humanity appeared vulnerable, they were dismissed, mocked, and exploited. Their legal claims were ignored. Their dignity was trampled. Their representatives were treated like children who didn't understand the real galaxy. Jake's voice grew harder as he continued. He said that Earth now understood how the Federation really worked. Power was what mattered, not justice or fairness. Strength commanded respect, while weakness invited contempt. The Federation's laws protected those who could enforce them, not those who deserved protection. But he also made something very clear. Humanity had no interest in conquest or domination. They were not building an empire. They were not planning to invade other species or seize their territory. The Vengeance and ships like it existed for one purpose only: to ensure that Earth and its people could never be threatened, bullied, or coerced. Jake explained that Earth was willing to continue working within the Federation framework. They believed in cooperation between species. They wanted to contribute to galactic science, trade, and culture. But they would do so as equals, not as subordinates. Human territorial claims would be respected. Human representatives would be heard with the same weight given to any other species, and any species that attempted to intimidate or exploit humanity would receive the same response the Skarath had gotten. That was not a threat. It was simply a statement of fact. Earth would defend its interests with whatever force was necessary. Then Jake offered an olive branch. He said that Earth was willing to share some of its defensive technology with the Federation. Their advances in railgun design, shield technology, and missile guidance systems could benefit everyone. This was a gesture of goodwill, proof that humanity wanted to be partners rather than adversaries. But in return, Earth expected to be treated as a full and equal member of the Federation. Their votes would carry the same weight as any other species. Their territorial boundaries would be recognized and protected. Their representatives would be shown the same respect given to representatives of older, more established civilizations. Jake finished his speech and returned to his seat. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the debates began. They lasted for hours, with different species arguing different positions. Some wanted to punish Earth for deception. Others wanted to accept the new reality and move forward. A few suggested that humanity's approach had been reasonable given the circumstances. Eventually, a consensus formed. The Federation would not expel Earth or impose sanctions. They would recognize the revised territorial boundaries that included Kepler 442. They would acknowledge that humanity had the right to maintain defensive military forces. The alternative was creating a powerful independent nation on their borders, which no one wanted. But more than the official decision, what changed was the informal dynamics. Species that had previously treated human diplomats as naive newcomers now engaged with them seriously. Trade negotiations became more equitable. Disputes that might have been dismissed before were now handled through proper channels. Earth had not become the dominant power in the Federation, but they had secured their position as a force that demanded respect. In the months that followed, something surprising happened. The Skarath Empire, despite being humiliated in battle, became one of humanity's closest associates. The warrior culture of the Skarath respected strength honestly displayed. Admiral Krath himself, after recovering from his defeat, became an advocate for human inclusion in Federation military councils. He argued that any species capable of designing something like the Vengeance deserved to be taken seriously. He also noted that the humans had shown restraint when they could have easily slaughtered his entire fleet. That combination of power and discipline was worthy of respect in Skarath culture. Other species reached out to Earth with new trade agreements and research partnerships. Some genuinely wanted to cooperate. Others wanted to keep potential rivals close where they could be monitored. Either way, humanity's position in the galaxy was transformed. In the Kepler 442 system, Commander Kate Sullivan remained on station aboard the Vengeance. Her mission had been successful beyond what anyone expected. The system was secure, the threat was neutralized, and Earth had sent its message to the entire galaxy. She stood on the bridge looking at the planet that would someday host human colonies. Children would be born here who would never know Earth except through history lessons. They would grow up as citizens of a galactic civilization, with alien neighbors and interstellar trade, but they would do so safely, protected by the fleet their ancestors had built in secret.